What he thought I'd lost. The divorce papers landed on my kitchen table while both of my newborn sons slept against my chest. My husband was smiling, the kind of smile a man wears when he believes he's already won. "Sign it," Brad said. Behind him, standing in my living room with one hand resting on his shoulder, was his boss, Vanessa Holt. Cream wool coat, red lipstick, and the calm, untouchable look of someone who has never once worried about money. I'd been home from Fort Belvoir Community Hospital for 3 days. 3 days. 42 years old, still sore from an emergency C-section, running on hospital coffee and maybe 2 hours of real sleep, holding twin boys who still had those pale blue hospital bands looped around their ankles. My duffel bag sat half unpacked by the closet. My boots were drying near the heating vent because the storm that December had come in hard and hadn't let up. I looked at Brad. "You brought her here." He didn't even blink. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be, Rachel." My mother-in-law, Diane, stood by the breakfast bar with her arms crossed. She'd been staying with us to help, which mostly meant critiquing how I folded receiving blankets and informing me that formula was a shortcut for lazy mothers. Vanessa's eyes moved around my kitchen the way you'd inspect a rental unit you were thinking of listing. Brad slid a manila envelope toward me. "The terms are fair. You keep your personal things. I'll take the house." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because my body didn't seem to know what else to do with the moment. "The house," I repeated. "The one my re-enlistment bonus helped save." Diane snapped, "Don't start with the military martyr routine." One of the twins stirred against my shoulder. I shifted him higher, and his mouth opened and then settled again into sleep. Brad leaned down, his voice dropping. "Rachel, I'm asking nicely. Sign it tonight." That's when I saw it in his face. Not guilt. Not even nerves. Confidence. He genuinely believed that a woman 3 days postpartum, stitches still healing under her sweatpants, 2 infants in her arms, would simply fold. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. Vanessa finally spoke. "There are shelters. For situations like this." Situations like this. As if I were a scheduling conflict. Diane pointed at the door. "Take your babies and go. You've embarrassed this family long enough." Wind slammed against the window hard enough to rattle the glass. For a second, I looked past all of them, at the stockings still hanging over the fireplace. Mine said Rachel. Brad's said Dad. Even though he hadn't changed a single diaper since we'd come home from the hospital. I didn't sign. I didn't scream. I picked up the diaper bag, tucked both boys as close inside my coat as I could manage, and walked out into the snow. By the time I reached my old Ford Escape, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. But before I turned the engine over, I made one phone call. Not to the police. Not to Brad, to my commanding officer. The heater in the Escape coughed out air that barely reached my feet. Snow piled onto the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, and both boys had started to cry. That particular newborn cry that spikes your heart rate, because you know they don't understand cold or fear. They only understand hunger. My phone rang before I'd even backed out of the driveway. Captain Rachel Carter. "Yes, sir." It was Colonel James Whitaker, my battalion commander. "I just got your message." "Where are you?" I looked back at the little brick house in Alexandria. The porch light had already gone dark. "I'm leaving home." A pause. Then quietly, "Are you and the babies safe?" Nobody had asked me that all evening. "I think so." "I think so isn't good enough?" Those words broke something loose in me. For the first time since Brad had walked through that door with Vanessa, I cried. Silent tears because I didn't want to upset the twins any more than they already were. Colonel Whitaker let me cry. He didn't fill the silence. After almost a full minute, he said, "Listen carefully. Drive to Walter Reed's Fisher House. I'll call ahead. This isn't charity, Captain. You gave this country 21 years. Let us take care of one of our own. 21 years, Afghanistan, Kuwait, birthdays spent overseas. Missing my mother's funeral because my unit couldn't rotate home in time. I had never once asked the Army for anything beyond my next assignment. Now I needed somewhere warm to put my sons down for the night. 40 minutes later, a volunteer named Martha met us at the door, late 60s, fuzzy slippers under her winter coat. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, and didn't ask a single question. She just opened the door wider. "Let's get these little boys warm. I already made chicken soup. Would you like some?" I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I nearly laughed. "I'd love some." Sometimes kindness is loud. That night, it sounded like someone warming a bottle while someone else unfolds a clean blanket, without asking why you needed either. The next morning, reality caught up with me. My checking account held exactly when the 842ers. The mortgage was due in 12 days. Brad had cut my access to our joint credit card before midnight. I found out trying to order diapers online. Card declined. Again. Martha glanced over my shoulder at the screen. He planned this. Men like that usually do. At noon, a text came through from Brad. Have your attorney contact mine. Nothing about the twins. Nothing about whether we'd made it through the storm. 5 minutes later, don't make this difficult. Vanessa and I are moving forward. Vanessa and I. Not even 24 hours out the door. I deleted both messages and, that afternoon, sat down with a legal assistance attorney on base. Major Elena Brooks listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she leaned back. Rachel, who paid the down payment on the house? My parents. And whose name is on the original deed? My father's and mine. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in days. I don't think your husband understands what he just did. For the first time since I'd walked out into that storm, I felt something besides grief. Not happiness. Not revenge, curiosity. Major Brooks opened a folder. I think we pull every financial record your husband has touched in the last 5 years. Why? Because men who think they've already won get careless. Something told me Brad had been careless for a very long time. I learned something that week I wouldn't wish on anyone. Leaving a bad marriage is emotional. Untangling one is business. Every morning at 6, I fed the twins, bundled them into the stroller, and walked the quiet streets around Fisher House while the cold cleared my head. They'd usually be asleep within 10 minutes, buying me a stretch of peace to think in. When they slept, I gathered paperwork, mortgage records, tax returns, insurance policies, bank statements. By day 4, the dining table at Fisher House looked less like a place to eat and more like an evidence room. Major Brooks came by after work with 2 coffees and a legal pad. You've been busy. Couldn't sleep. Most people cry after a divorce. Did that already? She went quiet, scanning the documents. Then her smile disappeared entirely. Rachel, did you know Brad refinanced the house last year? What? A home equity loan. Your signature's on it. I stared at the page. It looked like mine. Same slant, same initials, the same little flourish under the last name. But it wasn't. I'd signed deployment paperwork thousands of times over my career. I knew my own handwriting better than my own face in a mirror. Someone had practiced this. This may be forgery, Major Brooks said quietly. For a moment, I couldn't get a breath in. That house had been my parents' before they'd retired to Tennessee. When Brad and I married, my father had agreed to transfer it into my name because he wanted our children, someday, to grow up where I had. Brad had borrowed almost $300,000 against it. Without telling me. Where did the money go? I whispered. That's our next question. 2 days later, Facebook answered it. A coworker of Brad's had posted photos from a company holiday party. Vanessa stood beside him wearing diamond earrings I'd never seen. The caption, celebrating another record-breaking year. Someone had commented, love the new beach house. A beach house. Brad and I had never owned a beach house. I clicked through to Vanessa's profile and found a photo of her on a deck overlooking the Chesapeake, Brad's arm around her waist. Posted 8 months earlier. 8 months. That meant he'd already been seeing her while we were choosing names. While we painted the nursery. While he held my hand in the waiting room at every prenatal appointment. I closed the laptop, not angry, just suddenly, completely clear. That evening, my father called. How are my grandsons? Eating constantly. Sounds healthy. A pause. And you? I almost lied. Instead, I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Rachel, I need to tell you something. I never fully transferred the property. What do you mean? The deed still requires my signature for any refinancing or sale. I insisted on that clause after Brad started asking odd questions about what the house was worth. My heart picked up. So if he refinanced without you? He may have committed mortgage fraud. For the first time, I understood this wasn't simply a cruel husband walking out on his family. Brad had built his new life on lies, and lies leave paperwork, lots of it. Major Brooks had been right. The more confident he got, the sloppier he became. The following Monday was ordinary in the way my new life had started to be ordinary, Feed the twins, change diapers, answer emails from Army HR, meet with my attorney, pretend I wasn't exhausted. The boys had settled into a rhythm. Bottles every 3 hours, and between feedings, they'd curl tiny fingers around mine and drift off without a single worry in the world. Watching them reminded me why I couldn't afford to make decisions out of anger. I needed to make smart ones. At 9 that morning, Major Brooks walked into the legal office with a thick folder. I have something. She laid bank statements across the table, one highlighted transaction after another. $96,000. $41,500. $78,000. What am I looking at? She slid another page over. A luxury dealership. A down payment on the beach house. High-end jewelry. Then she tapped the final line. Holt Executive Consulting, LLC. Vanessa's company. My stomach dropped. He wired money directly to her. He used your home, Major Brooks said, to finance another woman's life. That afternoon, Brad's attorney sent a settlement offer. He wanted almost everything. The house, his retirement account, our joint savings, even my grandfather's antique dining table. At the bottom, Mrs. Carter has no realistic ability to maintain the marital residence. I laughed out loud. What's funny? Major Brooks asked. He thinks I'm broke. That's useful. My father drove up from Tennessee that evening, 10 hours on the road, wearing his old flannel jacket and carrying enough food to feed the whole floor. The moment he saw the twins, his whole face softened. There's my boys. He held each one before he even looked at me. You've lost weight. I've been busy. You've been surviving. He hugged me without asking permission, and I hadn't realized how badly I needed it. Over dinner, he set another folder on the table. Stopped by the county recorder's office on the way up. Inside were copies of the original deeds and loan filings, one page marked with a yellow sticky note. Missing signature. This is yours, he said. They filed the refinance without my notarized approval. They forged it. They certainly didn't get it from me. He leaned back. I've run a construction company for 40 years, Rachel. I've seen people cheat. I've also learned something. The first lie always needs another one. 3 days later, the second lie showed up. Brad called, sounding strangely cheerful. I hear your father's been snooping through county records. I said nothing. It won't matter. The paperwork's done. A pause, and then, almost gleefully, and don't expect anyone at Channel 7 to answer your calls anymore. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? I know you've been interviewing there. Only 3 people knew I'd applied for the civilian public affairs position at Washington's Channel 7 after my retirement. Me, the station manager, and Vanessa, whose consulting firm handled the station's corporate media partnerships. Brad hadn't just taken my house. He was trying to take my career, too. I hung up without another word. Then I dialed a different number, someone who owed me a favor from 15 years back. And for the first time, I had something like a plan. Standing outside Fisher House the next morning with coffee gone cold in my hand, my phone rang. Rachel Carter. I was wondering if you'd still recognize my voice. Linda Morales laughed. We'd served together in Afghanistan in 2010, when she'd been an Army public affairs specialist. She'd since built an award-winning career in television and was now news director at WJLA Channel 7. She'd also been one of the 3 people who knew about my interview. I need to ask you something, I said. Go ahead. Did someone tell you not to hire me? A long silence. Then, yes, a woman named Vanessa Holt. She said you were emotionally unstable after giving birth. Anger issues. Not fit for a newsroom. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the lie was so audacious. I've never even met her. I know. I checked your record before I listened to anyone else. 21 years of exemplary service. Multiple commendations. A Bronze Star, 0 disciplinary actions. She paused. People don't build that kind of reputation overnight, Rachel. Tears filled my eyes. You build it over a lifetime. That afternoon, Linda invited me to the station, not for another interview, just to talk. Martha happily took the twins for 2 hours. You go, she said, waving me off. You deserve an adult conversation. Channel 7 looked exactly how I remembered it. Bright lights, busy hallways, people carrying cameras and coffee at the same time. Linda hugged me before either of us said a word. You look tired. I have 1-month-old twins. Fair point. We talked for almost an hour, not really about television, about integrity, about service, about what happens when decent people stay quiet while dishonest ones get loud. Then she opened a folder. My employment application. I never rejected you. I just put your file on hold because Vanessa insisted I should. She leaned forward. Then something strange happened. She kept calling 5 times, trying to convince me not to hire someone she'd supposedly never met. Linda smiled. That raised every alarm bell I have. Before I left, she stopped me. One more thing. We're launching a weekly segment honoring veterans who've made a difference after service. We'd like you to be our first guest. I haven't done anything. You served your country. You survived betrayal, and now you're raising newborn twins on your own. Trust me, our viewers would rather hear from someone real than another politician. I asked when it would air. Second Saturday in March, exactly 4 months after Brad threw me out. Driving home, I wasn't thinking about television. I was thinking about timing. Brad had spent months trying to quietly destroy my credibility before I ever knew there was a fight. Without meaning to, he'd handed me something worth more than revenge, a chance for the truth to reach people. And unlike lies, the truth doesn't need perfect timing. It just needs a microphone. The morning of the interview started at 4:45 a.m. because one of the twins had decided that was breakfast time, and his brother agreed. By 6, both boys were fed, changed, and wearing matching blue sweaters Martha had knitted them. They look like little Navy recruits, she said proudly. They're Army babies, I corrected, grinning. I suppose I'll forgive them. I laughed without forcing it for the first time in months. At the station, Linda was waiting. You ready? I've briefed generals. And I've never been this nervous. The interview wasn't what I expected. Nobody asked about Brad. Nobody mentioned Vanessa or the divorce. The host, Michael Reeves, leaned in and asked what had kept me serving for 21 years. People, I said. My soldiers. My country. Believing that when someone beside you falls, you don't leave them behind. Is that why you adopted 2 retired military working dogs after your last deployment? They rescued me more than I rescued them. The conversation stayed simple. Military life, motherhood, finding purpose after service. When the twins fussed halfway through, Michael smiled into the camera. Well, I'd say they're ready for lunch. Everyone laughed. Nothing felt staged. Afterward, walking me toward the garage, Linda said, You never mentioned your husband. I wasn't here to. She stopped. When Vanessa kept calling, I expected someone bitter. I met someone graceful instead. I shrugged. Being angry is exhausting. It also makes terrible television. That Saturday, Martha insisted on making pancakes. Dad had driven back up the night before. We all crowded into the small living room while the twins, typically, slept through the entire thing. At 9 sharp, the program began. Old training footage from Fort Benning, a deployment ceremony, a muddy field exercise where everyone looked 20 years younger. Then the camera cut to me holding my sons. Captain Rachel Carter thought her toughest battles were overseas, Michael's voice said. She never imagined the hardest one would begin after coming home. Dad reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Across town, in a large modern house overlooking the Potomac, Brad sat with a cup of coffee. Vanessa walked in carrying her laptop. What are you watching? Nothing. Then my face filled the screen. Brad nearly dropped his mug. Today we're honoring Army Captain Rachel Carter, Michael said warmly. The segment ran through the footage. My career, the volunteers at Fisher House. Nothing about betrayal. Just the truth. Vanessa's voice went flat. Why is she on television? Brad didn't answer. He couldn't. The segment closed. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the loudest. Sometimes they're simply the ones who keep showing up. My phone started buzzing before the credits even finished. Old friends, former neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in years. One message read, I had no idea what you were going through. Another, Rachel, call me. I think I know something about Brad's finances. It was from Brad's former accountant. The story wasn't over. It was only getting started. I called the number before I could talk myself out of it. Rachel, it's been a long time. Tom Bennett had handled Brad's accounts for almost 7 years. Careful, quiet, the kind of man who brought his own calculator instead of trusting the one on his phone. If Tom was calling, something was wrong. I saw you this morning. My wife had it on. A pause. I owe you an apology. I should have called months ago. What happened? I resigned from Brad's accounts 3 months back. He asked me to sign off on financial statements I knew weren't accurate. That afternoon, Dad watched the twins while I drove to a small diner in Fairfax. Tom was already there, same neat gray mustache, looking older than I remembered. He slid a thick envelope across the table. I kept copies. Everything I legally could. Bank records, corporate expense reports, property tax filings, wire transfers, several pages flagged with yellow sticky notes. He tapped the first one. An $82,400 transfer to Holt Executive Consulting, logged as a business expense. Your husband sells industrial equipment, Tom said. What exactly was his boss consulting him about every single month? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He flipped to another page. Nearly $140,000 listed as executive housing assistance. The beach house? He used company funds to help buy it. Was that legal? Not if the board never approved it. Tom folded his hands. I can't accuse him of a crime, but I can tell you the numbers don't add up. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting under everything else. Did everyone know? People suspected the affair. No one knew he was planning to leave right after the twins were born. He sighed. A lot of people started talking after your interview. Before we left, he handed me one more envelope. This didn't come from me. It arrived at my office anonymously. Inside was a flash drive, no note, just 3 words in black marker. Watch Vanessa's emails. I haven't opened it, he said. Didn't want anyone accusing me of tampering. That word, evidence, had followed me the whole drive home. That evening, Major Brooks sorted through everything Tom had given us, organizing it into folders. Mortgage, corporate expenses, personal transfers. Then she held up the flash drive. We're not plugging this into your laptop. Figured. I know someone in Army Cyber Command who owes me a favor. An hour later, the drive was in professional hands, and we waited. When the phone finally rang, Major Brooks listened without a word, then looked at me. The drive has hundreds of emails. Between Vanessa and someone on the company's board of directors. My heart lurched. At Brad? No, someone much higher. I didn't sleep. Not because of the twins. They gave me nearly 4 uninterrupted hours, which felt like a miracle. But because of those 3 words. Someone much higher. At 8 the next morning, Major Brooks called. They'd finished reviewing the drive. The cyber office was a plain brick building. Fluorescent lights, gray carpet, government furniture. A civilian analyst named Kevin projected the emails onto a monitor, mostly ordinary meeting schedules and budget approvals. Then he opened a thread between Vanessa and Richard Langford, the company's board chairman. One read, Brad will do whatever I tell him. He's desperate for the promotion. Another, once his divorce is finalized, there won't be anything tying him down. I felt sick. Major Brooks stayed calm. Keep going. Kevin pulled up a message with attached financial projections. After the refinancing goes through, he'll have enough liquidity to invest in the Chesapeake project. The refinancing, I said. My house. They were talking about your house, Kevin confirmed. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was a plan. An expensive one. He opened a recovered, previously deleted message from Langford. Make sure Rachel signs quickly. We don't need unnecessary complications. I stared at the screen. He knew about me. He knew enough, Major Brooks said softly. Driving home, I kept turning that phrase over. Unnecessary complications. Not Rachel. Not Captain Carter. Not a wife or a mother. A complication to be managed. Strangely, hearing it stopped me feeling sorry for myself. Once someone reduces you to an obstacle, you stop worrying about disappointing them. That afternoon, Linda called again. You've become surprisingly popular. Our interview has nearly 1 million views online. We've gotten dozens of emails from veterans. One stood out. Someone who worked at Brad's company claiming employees have been pressured to falsify expense reports for years. No name, but they attached payroll records. By now, I had mortgage documents, wire transfers, corporate expenses, recovered emails, and anonymous payroll records. The pieces were fitting together. I still had one problem. None of it mattered unless someone with authority was willing to listen. 2 days later, that chance arrived. Tom called. The company's annual shareholder meeting is Friday. The board will have to answer questions publicly. I don't own stock. You do. 50 voting shares inherited from your grandfather when the company went public. I'd forgotten entirely. Brad was counting on that. He forgot too. Friday morning, I put on my Army service uniform. Not for attention, but because after 21 years it reminded me who I was before Brad tried to convince me I wasn't enough. Dad held one of the twins while I adjusted my jacket. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Courage isn't walking in without fear. It's walking in anyway. I kissed both boys and drove into downtown Washington for the first time since that snowy December afternoon. I wasn't walking away from anything anymore. I was walking toward it. The headquarters of Holt Industrial Systems sat 3 blocks from the White House. I'd been there exactly twice during my marriage, both times asked by Brad not to wear my uniform. People here don't really understand military culture, he'd said. Standing in the lobby, I finally understood what he'd really meant. He hadn't wanted anyone comparing our lives. The receptionist checked her list. I don't see your name. Tom had warned me this might happen. I slid my stock certificate across the counter. I believe these voting shares qualify me. Her expression changed instantly. One moment, ma'am. 5 minutes later, I walked into a boardroom holding nearly 80 shareholders. At the front sat Richard Langford, Vanessa beside him, Brad beside her. Every drop of color drained from Brad's face when he saw me. He whispered something to Vanessa. She turned. Our eyes met, and for a second she looked exactly the way I had looked months earlier, completely unprepared. Financial reports came first, then Richard opened the floor for questions. My hand went up. Yes, Ms. Carter. My question concerns executive expenses. Brad stared at the floor. Can someone explain why company funds paid over $100,000 toward executive housing connected to Holt Executive Consulting? Vanessa's smile vanished. Richard adjusted his glasses. I'm not familiar with that transaction. I thought you might say that. I held up the document. This transfer bears your approval. Murmurs spread. The CFO shook his head. He'd never seen it either. I placed another page on the projector. This wire lists monthly consulting fees paid to Ms. Holt. My company provided legitimate services, Vanessa said. Wonderful. Then I'm sure you can explain why those payments coincided with personal purchases made by Mr. Brad Carter. Brad stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. No, I said. This is accounting. A few quiet laughs rippled through the room. Richard tried to regain control. This meeting isn't the proper venue. It became the proper venue the moment company money started funding private relationships. The room erupted into whispers. A shareholder near the back raised his hand. I'd like those documents entered into the record. Another echoed him. Within seconds, nearly half the room had their hands up. Brad turned on me. You planned this. No, I said. You planned it. You lied. You forged signatures. You borrowed against my family's home. You abandoned your newborn sons. You tried to destroy my career. I took a breath. All I did was tell the truth. No one applauded. The silence was louder than clapping would have been. The audit committee chairman stood. I moved that this meeting be suspended pending an independent forensic investigation. Another director seconded it. It passed unanimously. Security approached Richard, then Brad, then Vanessa. As I walked out, I heard Brad call my name. I didn't turn around. The last time I'd walked away from him, I'd been carrying 2 newborns into a snowstorm. This time, I walked into warm spring sunshine, and I never looked back. 3 months later, a thick envelope arrived from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I didn't open it right away. The twins, Ethan and Noah, had just learned to crawl, and were far more interested in chasing each other across my father's living room. Dad laughed as Noah grabbed the dog's tail. Looks like we've got another troublemaker. I think we have 2, I said. Life had gone surprisingly ordinary, and after everything, ordinary felt like a gift. The investigation took nearly 4 months. Forensic accountants worked through years of records. The board hired an outside law firm. The county opened its own inquiry into the forged mortgage. One lie led to another, just as my father had said it would. Brad hadn't acted alone. Richard Langford resigned before the investigation closed. Vanessa's consulting contracts were terminated within days. The company announced sweeping governance reforms. Brad lost his executive position before spring was over, and civil suits followed. The refinancing was voided over the forged signatures, and the house legally reverted to its original ownership. Dad and I sold it, rather than keep a place full of painful memories, splitting the proceeds exactly as we'd always planned. The twins' college fund came first. A week later, my attorney called. The divorce is final. I waited for more. That's it. After everything we've been through, Yes. No courtroom speech, no last-minute confession. Just one sentence, ending a marriage that should have ended long before it did. I sat on the porch afterward with a cup of coffee while the boys napped inside. The silence felt different now. Not lonely, peaceful. About a month after that, Channel 7 officially hired me as Director of Community and Veteran Outreach, not an on-air role. I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to help veterans tell their stories, connect military families to resources, remind people that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Every Thursday, I still visit Fisher House. Not because I have to, because I remember exactly what it felt like to arrive there with 2 frightened newborns and nowhere else to go. Martha still volunteers every Tuesday, and still pretends to be surprised every time the twins run toward her. My goodness, who are these handsome gentlemen? They giggle every single time. One afternoon over lunch, Linda asked me, "If you could say one thing to Brad today, what would it be?" I thought about it for a long time. Nothing. No? He already lost everything that mattered. The truth did that. I didn't. People sometimes ask whether revenge really brings peace. My answer is always the same. Revenge built on anger fades fast. But standing up for yourself with honesty, patience, and dignity can change the entire course of your life. I didn't win because someone else failed. I won because I finally stopped letting other people decide what I was worth. If this reminds even one person that it's never too late to walk away from disrespect, then it was worth telling. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life one hard day at a time, you're stronger than you think you are.